He carried responsibility quietly, the way some men carry weather in their bones. One night asked him to choose between being seen and being kind, between rules and shelter. By morning, nothing was said. Only a look that suggested lives rarely stay hidden once touched. Stay for the quiet after the choice. Let the silence finish the story. The building settled into itself after midnight, the way large places do when the day is finished using them. Fluorescent lights dimmed automatically along the corridors. Elevators rested at default floors. The air carried the faint scent of disinfectant, and carpet fibers warmed by hours of foot traffic, now gone. He walked his rounds at an even pace, keys quiet against his belt. The uniform never quite fit right, no matter how many times it was altered. He had learned to move carefully inside it, shoulders relaxed, hands steady. Security work was less about authority than attention, knowing when something was out of place, knowing when not to make it worse. He checked the monitors first, as he always did. Rows of black and white feeds blinked back at him, empty lobbies, closed doors, the parking garage holding its breath. The cameras did not sleep. They remembered everything. He was about to log the hour when he noticed movement where there should have been none. One of the executive floors, a shape crossing the edge of the frame too slowly to be staff finishing late, too unsteady to be cleaning crew. He stood for a moment longer than necessary, eyes fixed on the screen. Then he picked up his radio, set it back down, and took the stairs. The executive floor was quiet in a different way, softer carpet, walls that absorbed sound, offices arranged for visibility rather than privacy. He recognized the silhouette before he reached a corner. She was seated on a bench near the conference room, shoes discarded beside her, one hand braced against the wall as if it might move. She did not look up when he approached. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. The sharp line she usually carried herself with had loosened, as though gravity had finally been allowed to act on her. "Ma'am," he said gently, stopping a few steps away. Not close enough to crowd her. Close enough to be heard. She turned her head slowly, her eyes focused with effort. There was a moment of confusion, then recognition, not of him exactly, but of the uniform, the role. Her mouth opened as if to speak, then closed again. "I'm fine," she said, the words practiced, the delivery not. He nodded once, accepting the statement without agreeing to it. "Let's get you somewhere quieter." Her gaze drifted past him, toward the glass walls that framed the hallway. Beyond them, cameras watched faithfully. He followed her line of sight. The red indicator light blinked. Recording. He knew the procedure. Document the incident. Call it in. Let the system handle it. The system was very good at protecting itself. She tried to stand. Her knees failed her halfway. He stepped forward without thinking, not touching her, just placing himself where falling would not be possible. She caught the sleeve of his jacket with surprising strength. For a moment, neither of them moved. "I don't want this scene," she said quietly. Not pleading, just stating a fact, the way someone does when they have finally run out of ways to command an outcome. He glanced again at the camera. He could already feel the weight of the choice settling. He had made choices like this before, smaller ones. Turning his head at the right moment, allowing grace where rules would not. This was larger. This carried risk. "Come on," he said, lowering his voice. "This way." He guided her down a side corridor, one not covered by the main cameras, installed years ago and never updated. He knew the blind spots the way other men knew shortcuts through their neighborhoods. Knowledge earned slowly, out of necessity. She leaned heavily on him now, the sharp scent of alcohol unmistakable. He kept his grip firm but respectful, his posture steady. He did not ask questions. He did not comment. He moved with the same care he used at home when his child slept on his shoulder, heavy with trust. They reached a small break room rarely used at this hour. He helped her sit, then stepped back, giving her space. He poured water into a paper cup and set it within reach. "You can stay here until it passes," he said. "I'll keep watch." She looked at him then, really looked. The distance that usually separated her from the world had thinned. Her expression held something unguarded, almost startled. "You don't know what this could cost you," she said. He shrugged lightly. "I know what it cost to do nothing." She studied him for another moment, then nodded, as if accepting terms she had not expected to be offered. She drank the water slowly, both hands wrapped around the cup. He turned his back slightly, facing the door. He logged a routine patrol in his notebook. Nothing unusual. All clear. When he checked on her again, her breathing had steadied. Her eyes were closed. He adjusted the thermostat by a degree, the way he did at home, to keep the night even. He did not stay longer than necessary. When she was stable enough to be alone, he left quietly, returning to his route. The cameras blinked on, indifferent. Outside, dawn was beginning to press its pale light against the city. He finished his shift, signed out, and drove home along streets still half asleep. At his apartment, he slipped off his shoes and moved softly. His child was awake, sitting at the small table, cereal untouched, waiting. He hung his jacket, washed his hands, and sat down across from them as if nothing in the world had shifted. But as he listened to the spoon-scraped porcelain, he felt it clearly. Some choices did not announce themselves. They waited. Morning arrived without ceremony. The sky was already bright when he left the apartment, the city awake ahead of schedule. His child walked beside him, backpack riding low, fingers tucked into the sleeve of his coat. They moved at the same pace they always did, unhurried, practiced, quiet. Breakfast had been simple, toast cut carefully in half. A banana peeled and broken into pieces small enough to manage. No mention of the night before. He had learned not to carry work home, not even in fragments. Children felt what adults tried to hide, but they understood routine. Routine was safety. At the school gate, he crouched to zip the jacket that had been left open. His child looked up at him, eyes thoughtful. "You're tired," they said. He smiled faintly. "Just a long night." They nodded, satisfied with that. He waited until they were inside before turning back toward the bus stop. The morning crowd pressed in around him, coats brushing, conversations overlapping. He stood apart, hands in pockets, eyes forward. By the time he reached the building, the lobby had resumed its polished rhythm. Shoes clicked against marble. Voices carried upward. The scent of coffee replaced disinfectant. He signed in, accepted the clipboard from the day supervisor, and took his post without comment. He did not expect to see her so soon. She emerged from the elevator mid-morning, flanked by two assistants, posture restored, expression composed. Hair pulled back cleanly, shoes precise. The woman who crossed the lobby bore no visible trace of the night before. If he had not been there, he might have doubted it himself. Their eyes met briefly. It was not a look of gratitude, not apology. It was recognition, steady, unflinching, as if she were acknowledging a shared truth without inviting conversation. She did not slow. She did not avert her gaze. She passed him, as she would any other employee, with the same professional nod she gave to everyone. But there was something held in the space between the nod and the step that followed, something deliberate. He returned the gesture evenly. No stiffness, no familiarity. His pulse remained calm. The rest of the morning unfolded with its usual demands. Deliveries, a minor alarm triggered by a door not fully latched, a request for assistance with a badge that refused to scan. He handled each with the same attention he always did. Just before noon, his radio crackled. "Change in assignment," the supervisor said. "You're covering executive access for the rest of the day." He paused only long enough to acknowledge the order. The reassignment was unusual but not unheard of. He gathered his things and moved upstairs. The executive floor felt different in daylight. Sunlight filtered through tinted glass. Offices hummed softly with restrained activity. He stationed himself near the main corridor, posture relaxed, eyes observant. She passed again an hour later, alone this time. Slower, focused on a document in her hands. When she looked up, it was because she had already known he was there. "Good afternoon," she said, stopping. "Good afternoon, ma'am," he replied. There was no hesitation in her voice, no strain, just calm acknowledgement. "I wanted you to know," she said, lowering her voice slightly, "that nothing from last night will be discussed." He nodded once. Understood. She studied him for a moment longer than required, not evaluating, considering. "Your schedule," she said. "Does it allow for school hours?" "Yes," he answered. "I work nights. Mornings are for my child." A flicker crossed her expression. Interest, perhaps. or something closer to respect. That will remain unchanged, she said. If anyone asks, this assignment is temporary. Operational need. Yes, ma'am. She turned to leave, then paused. Thank you, she added. Not loudly, not softly. Simply stated. He watched her walk away. Heels measured, shoulders squared, power reclaimed but altered. The afternoon passed without incident. When his shift ended, he signed out and collected his things. The city outside had warmed. He boarded the bus and rode it home, watching familiar streets slide past. At the school gate, his child ran to him, breathless, words tumbling out about spelling tests and a drawing taped to the classroom wall. He listened, nodding, asking the right questions. They walked home together, the day folding itself neatly away. That evening, as he washed dishes, his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Tomorrow's meeting will run late. Would it be possible to reschedule my departure? He read it twice. There was no signature. None was needed. He typed a reply slowly. I'll be on duty. He set the phone down and returned to the sink. The water ran warm over his hands. In the other room, his child laughed softly at a cartoon, unaware of the subtle shift taking place. Nothing had been said that could not be undone, but something had already begun to take shape. The meeting did not end on time. That much became clear before dusk settled. He had learned to read the building's rhythms, the subtle delays that announced themselves in quiet ways. Assistants lingering near elevators, office lights staying on a shade longer than usual, voices carrying past their normal hour. He adjusted his schedule without complaint, texted the neighbor who watched his child on rare evenings, heated a portion of soup left in the refrigerator for later. These adjustments were not disruptions. They were accommodations, folded carefully into a life built around contingencies. She came out just after 7. Not hurried, not unsteady, simply tired in the particular way that came from sustained attention. Her jacket was draped over her arm, hair loosened from its earlier restraint. She paused when she saw him, as though confirming something she already knew. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't intend to keep you. It's fine, he replied. I'm scheduled. She nodded, then hesitated. The driver's running late. Traffic. He waited. He had learned that silence often invited the rest of what needed to be said. Would it be all right, she continued, choosing her words with care, if I waited somewhere that wasn't public? He glanced down the corridor, then back at her. There's a room on the lower level, not much used, no cameras. Thank you. They took the service elevator together. The ride down was quiet, the hum of the machinery filling the space between them. She stood with her hands folded loosely, eyes forward. He remained near the door, professional, present. The room was small but clean. A table, 2 chairs, a vending machine humming in the corner. He turned on the overhead light and stepped aside to let her enter. I'll be right outside, he said. She shook her head. You don't have to. It's part of the job. She smiled faintly at that, then sat. He took the chair opposite her, leaving the door open. Time passed without pressure. She checked her phone once, then set it down. You have a child, she said eventually. Yes. How old? 7. She nodded, absorbing this. That's young. It is. She looked around the room, then back at him. This place, she said, feels ordinary. He considered the word. Most places are, once you sit still long enough. She laughed quietly, the sound brief and unguarded. Then the phone buzzed. The driver had arrived. When she left, she did so with a steadiness that did not need to prove itself. At the elevator, she paused. You go home now, she said. Not a question. Yes. Good, she replied. You should. He watched the doors close, then finished his shift. The city outside had cooled. He walked the last few blocks home, the sky deepening overhead. The apartment smelled faintly of soap and crayons. His child was on the couch, knees tucked up, eyes half-lidded. He knelt to help with shoes, carried them to bed, listened to the day recounted in fragments. When the lights were off and the breathing even, he sat for a moment longer, just to be sure. The following week unfolded with quiet adjustments. Her meetings ran late twice more. Each time, she waited in the same room. Each time, he sat with her, not watching the clock, not pressing conversation. Sometimes they spoke of small things, sometimes they did not. One evening, the neighbor canceled at the last minute. He hesitated before mentioning it, but she noticed the shift immediately. Something wrong? No, he said, then reconsidered. Just a change. She waited. I need to pick up my child, he added. It's on the way home. She stood. Then I'll come with you. He paused. It's not. I know, she said gently. If it's not appropriate, say so. He thought of the apartment, of the quiet order, of the child who judged people by how they listened. All right, he said. The walk was short. The school lights glowed warmly against the dark. His child spotted him immediately and ran forward, stopping short when they saw her. This is, he began. Hello, she said, crouching to their level. I'm a friend from work. His child studied her carefully, then nodded. You look tired. She smiled, surprised. I am. You should sit when you get home, the child advised. I will, she promised. At the apartment, shoes lined the entry neatly. She followed his lead, moving quietly, observing without comment. Dinner was reheated soup and bread. She ate what was offered, asked nothing more. Later, as his child drew at the table, she watched, hands folded, eyes soft. You do this well, she said to him, quietly. He did not answer right away. Praise made him uneasy. Instead, he rinsed a bowl, dried it, placed it back where it belonged. It's just life, he said. She looked at the small room, the steady presence of it. The calm held. When she left that night, it was with reluctance she did not name, and when he closed the door behind her, the apartment felt slightly altered, not disrupted, just expanded, as though it had learned it could hold more without losing itself. Time did not announce itself as change. It moved the way it always had, quietly, incrementally, until the shape of things was no longer what it had been, and neither of them could point to when that happened. She began to appear in his days without disruption. Not suddenly, not insistently, just there, in the margins at first. A message asking if the lower-level room was free. A pause near his post that turned into a few exchanged words. A shared elevator ride that lasted long enough for silence to feel intentional, rather than awkward. He never asked why she stayed late so often. She never asked why he chose nights over days. They accepted these truths the way people do when questioning would feel like intrusion. The child adjusted first. Children noticed patterns before adults admitted them. They noticed who arrived when expected, who listened without distraction, who returned. After the third evening, she joined them. Never announced, always invited quietly. The child stopped looking to him for permission before speaking to her. They showed her drawings taped to the refrigerator, explained the rules of a game played on the rug, asked her opinion on which cereal was best, then disagreed cheerfully with her answer. She responded without performance, sat cross-legged on the floor without concern for the cost of her clothes, listened with her full attention, eyes level, hands still. When she laughed, it was brief and genuine, as though she were surprised by the sound each time. He watched this carefully, saying little. Trust, he knew, was not something to manage. It either grew or it didn't. Their evenings found a rhythm. She arrived. Shoes were set by the door. Dinner was simple pasta, rice, soup reheated again and again without apology. The child spoke most. She asked questions that showed she had been listening the night before. He washed dishes while they talked. The sound of water steady, grounding. Sometimes she stayed late enough to help with homework. Sometimes she left before bedtime. She never crossed that boundary without invitation. When she did stay, she sat quietly at the table while he read aloud, her presence an added warmth rather than an interruption. Afterward, they drank tea in the small kitchen. She learned which mug he used, which one the child insisted was theirs alone. Learned that he folded laundry the same way every time, that he kept the apartment spare not out of minimalism, but out of respect for what a child could safely navigate. You don't fill space unless you need to, she said once, watching him put things away. It keeps the mind clear, he replied. She considered that. I don't think I've ever lived anywhere that felt clear. He did not ask what she meant. The words were enough. At work, their proximity remained careful. She never called him by name, never used his presence as convenience. When decisions were made that affected his schedule, she explained them plainly, with the same professionalism she offered anyone else, except that she listened when he spoke and adjusted when she could. Others noticed, not with suspicion, but with the mild curiosity that accompanied any break in routine. He felt it and remained unchanged. He had learned long ago that steadiness discouraged scrutiny better than defensiveness. She, on the other hand, was learning something new. There were evenings when she arrived exhausted, the kind of exhaustion that did not ask to be fixed. He never tried. He set food in front of her, gave her time, let her sit in silence while the child worked at the table, pencil scratching softly. Once, after a particularly long day, she closed her eyes mid-conversation. "I can leave," he said quietly. She shook her head. "No, just give me a minute." He did. When she opened her eyes again, they were clearer. "No one ever lets me be quiet," she said, not accusing, simply noticing. He shrugged. "Everyone needs it." She looked at him then, really looked not as staff, not as help, but as a man who had built something stable and asked nothing from it except that it hold. The distance between them shifted, subtle as breath. But he remained careful. At night, after she left, he checked the locks twice. He stood in his child's doorway longer than usual. He thought of the imbalance he could not erase: wealth, authority, consequence. He had learned the cost of hope once before, and so when she lingered a moment too long at the door, when her hand brushed his sleeve and did not immediately move away, he stepped back, gave her space. She noticed, and did not press. Respect moved both ways. The child, however, had no such caution. One evening, as she stood to leave, the child looked up from the couch and said, "Are you coming back tomorrow?" She paused, looked at him, then back at the child. "If I'm welcome," she said. "You are," the child replied easily. He said nothing. He did not need to. When the door closed behind her, the apartment settled again. Familiar. Safe. But something within its quiet walls had stretched, just enough to make room for possibility. He lay awake longer that night, listening to the building breathe. He did not imagine futures. He did not name feelings. He only acknowledged what was already true. Some things were growing, and he did not yet know how to stop them. What grew did so without urgency. There were no declarations, no moment he could isolate and name as the beginning. Instead, there were small continuities. The way she began to arrive with her sleeves already rolled, as if prepared to stay. The way she learned the child's schedule better than her own calendar. The way he no longer flinched when he heard her knock, because he had come to expect the sound. Winter edged closer. Evenings darkened earlier. The apartment filled with heavier air, coats hung by the door, boots lined neatly beneath them. She brought a scarf one night and forgot it on the back of a chair. He did not remind her. It stayed there. They spoke more now, but never in long stretches. Conversation came in fragments, shaped by shared attention rather than confession. She told him about a building she had designed once, how she had fought for windows no one else thought necessary. He told her about his child's mother only in the smallest ways, what she had loved, what she had left behind. Neither pressed further. He noticed how carefully she moved around the child, never correcting, never assuming. When the child asked questions she could not answer, she said so plainly without embarrassment. When she was tired, she did not mask it. She simply sat. One evening, as homework stretched longer than usual, the child grew frustrated. Pencil snapped. Tears followed quickly, fierce and brief. He was already moving toward them when she knelt first. "It's all right," she said calmly. "Let's breathe." The child looked at her, startled, then did as asked. In. Out. Again. He watched, hands still, allowing the moment to belong to them. Later, when the child was asleep, he poured tea and set a mug in front of her. "Thank you," he said quietly. She shook her head. "I didn't do anything special." He met her eyes. "You didn't make it worse." She smiled faintly. I've learned how easily that happens. There were nights when she stayed until it was too late to drive back comfortably. On those nights, she slept on the couch, wrapped in a blanket he kept folded away for guests who rarely came. He left water on the table beside her. In the morning, she rose early, folding the blanket carefully before he woke. Once, he found her standing in the kitchen before dawn, staring out the window, as if committing the stillness to memory. You don't have to leave so early, he said. I know, she replied, but I want to. He understood the difference. At work, the distance between them held. If anything, it grew more deliberate. She never lingered where others could see, never allowed familiarity to slip into her voice. He respected this, even when it made the days feel longer. The child sensed the restraint without understanding it. Why doesn't she eat with us at work? They asked once. He thought for a moment. Because some places have different rules. Do you like her rules? The child asked. He smiled softly. I like how she follows them. That seemed to satisfy. Still, he felt the weight building. There were moments, quiet ones, unguarded, when he caught her watching him as he listened to his child speak, or when he bent to tie a loose shoe. In those moments, her expression held something close to ache. He pretended not to see it, not because he did not return it, but because he did. He had learned to recognize the edge where care turned dangerous. One night, after she left, he stood at the sink longer than necessary. The apartment felt too quiet, the absence more pronounced than before. He rinsed the same cup twice, put it away, took it back out. In the bedroom doorway, his child stirred. She forgot her scarf again. They murmured sleepily. Yes, he said. She did. Will you give it back tomorrow? He hesitated. If she comes. The child rolled over. She always does. He stayed there until the breathing evened again. In the living room, the scarf lay where it had been left. He picked it up, felt its weight, the faint trace of her perfume. He folded it neatly, set it by the door where it would not be missed. He did not allow himself to imagine what it would mean if she stopped coming, but he knew now that if she did, something essential would go quiet. The shift did not arrive loudly. There was no argument, no sharp moment that announced something had gone wrong. Instead, the air between them grew more careful. Words were chosen with greater precision. Evenings shortened. She still came, but less often, and never without reason she could name. He noticed because he was practiced at noticing. It began with her schedule tightening. Meetings stacked closer together. Messages sent later phrased more formally. When she arrived, she carried herself with a restraint he recognized, not authority, but self-control under strain. The child noticed too. Is she busy again? They asked one evening, watching the door. Yes, he said. She has a lot to manage. The child accepted this, but not easily. They set their drawing aside and asked fewer questions that night. He sat with them longer at bedtime, reading an extra chapter, his voice steady even as his thoughts drifted. At work, whispers moved the way they always did when routines changed. Nothing malicious, just curiosity. A board visit scheduled unexpectedly. A compliance review announced without urgency, which was more concerning than if it had been urgent. He understood the implications without being told. Her presence in his life was not invisible. It had simply gone unquestioned until now. One afternoon she asked him to walk with her, not to the usual room, but outside, around the perimeter of the building. The city pressed in gently, traffic muted by distance. They're watching patterns, she said. Not you. Me. He nodded. That was always going to happen. She stopped walking, turned to face him. I should have been more careful. He met her gaze evenly. You were careful. Not enough. They stood there, the space between them filled with everything they did not say. He thought of his child, of the apartment that had learned to hold more, of how easily that could be undone. I won't let this touch my home, he said quietly. Her jaw tightened, then relaxed. Neither will I. That night she did not come over. The child asked once, then again the next evening. She said she'd come back, they said, voice smaller. He crouched in front of them. She meant it. Then why isn't she here? He searched for an answer that did not burden them. Sometimes adults need time to fix things. The child considered this. Will she fix it? I don't know, he admitted. The days stretched. Her messages became brief, functional. At work, their paths crossed only when necessary. When they did, she did not look away, but she did not linger either. He felt the absence more sharply than he expected. At home, he returned to older rhythms. Dinner earlier, fewer chairs set out. The scarf still hung by the door. He did not move it. One evening, after the child had gone to bed, his phone buzzed. I'm sorry for the distance, the message read. It's not fear, it's responsibility. He stared at the words for a long time before replying. I understand. He did. And that was the problem. Understanding did not soften the ache. It sharpened it. The following week, the child fell ill. Nothing severe. A fever. A cough that lingered into the night. He stayed home, pacing between the bedroom and the kitchen, measuring doses, listening to breathing. When the fever spiked unexpectedly, his composure slipped just enough for panic to surface. He texted her without thinking. I'm taking them to urgent care. Her reply came immediately. I'm coming. She arrived at the clinic before he was called back. No coat. Hair pulled back hastily. Concern plain on her face. She did not ask permission before sitting beside him. He did not object. The child reached for her hand without hesitation. It hurts, they said. She held their hand carefully. I know. The doctor reassured them. Medication prescribed. Rest advised. Nothing alarming, but something had already shifted. Outside, the night air was cold. She walked with them to the car. You shouldn't have come, he said, not unkindly. I wanted to, she replied, and that matters. He looked at her then, really looked. The strain in her eyes. The effort it took for her to hold back. This can't be half safe, he said quietly. For them, or for you. She nodded. I know. They stood there, neither stepping closer nor moving away. I don't regret any of it, she said, but I won't risk harming what you built. He felt the truth of that settle heavily. Then we need to be clear, he said. Yes, she agreed. They did not resolve it that night, but the choice ahead of them was no longer abstract. It had a face, it had a heartbeat, and it would not wait forever. The clarity came without force. There was no sudden revelation, no speech delivered at the right moment. Instead, it arrived the way truth often did in lives shaped by responsibility through logistics, through what could and could not be sustained without harm. She asked to see him on a Sunday afternoon, not at the building, not at the apartment. At a small park between their neighborhoods, quiet except for the sound of children on swings and the slow turning of leaves overhead. He brought his child, not as a statement, as a fact. She was already there when they arrived, sitting on a bench with her coat folded beside her. When she saw them, she stood, a softness in her expression that did not reach for control. Hi, she said. Hi, the child answered first, stepping closer. You're early. She smiled. I wanted to be. They walked together along the path, the child moving ahead, stopping often to inspect fallen leaves or call attention to something ordinary made interesting. He watched the way she followed, never rushing, never correcting. Eventually, the child grew bored and wandered toward the playground within sight. The space between the adults settled. I've made a decision, she said. Not defensively, not carefully, just plainly. He waited. I'm stepping back from day-to-day oversight at the building. Not permanently, but long enough to reset the lines that shouldn't have blurred. He nodded once. That won't be invisible. No, she agreed. It will be noticed. He studied her face. And you're all right with that? I'm choosing it, she said. There's a difference. The child called out to them then, waving from the swings. She lifted a hand in response, then looked back at him. I won't pretend I can give you simplicity, she continued. My life doesn't work that way. But I can give you consistency, boundaries that don't shift when it's inconvenient. He considered this. Thought of nights spent measuring risk, of mornings built around small hands and school gates. I won't bring uncertainty into my home, he said. Not for anyone. I know, she replied. That's why I'm saying this out loud. They sat on the bench together, leaving space between them, not distance, but respect. I don't need promises, he added. I need to know what happens when things get hard. She looked at him steadily. I don't disappear. The words were simple. They carried weight because she did not decorate them. When it was time to leave, the child returned, breathless. Are you coming with us? They asked her. She looked to him, then back to the child. If that's all right. He nodded. It is. They walked back together. No hands held, no gestures made for meaning, just shared direction. At the apartment, she moved with familiarity that no longer felt tentative. Shoes by the door, coat hung where space had been left for it. Dinner was quiet, unremarkable. The child talked. They listened. Later, after bedtime, they stood in the kitchen, the light low. This doesn't change everything, she said. No, he agreed. It just makes it possible. She reached for the scarf by the door, then stopped. I keep forgetting this. You don't, he said. You leave it. She smiled, small and honest. I don't want to be careful in ways that make me absent, she said. And I don't want to be brave in ways that make me reckless, he replied. They stood there, the understanding complete without further words. When she left that night, it was not with reluctance. It was with intention. Morning found them in patterns that no longer needed explanation. The child woke first, as they always did, padding quietly down the hallway before the rest of the apartment stirred. He followed a few minutes later, starting the kettle, opening the curtains just enough to let the light in without announcing it. She arrived not long after, not with urgency, not with ceremony, just a knock at the door, familiar now, answered without surprise. She carried a paper bag from the bakery down the street, still warm, the scent of bread settling easily into the room. You remembered, the child said, peering inside. She smiled. You said Wednesdays were the hardest. They ate together at the small table. No one hurried. The day waited for them, and for once it did not feel like an opponent. Conversation moved easily, school plans, weather, nothing that required guarding. After breakfast, she helped with shoes while he packed a lunch. Their movements overlapped without confusion. When the child left for school, they waved from the doorway together. The apartment did not feel borrowed anymore. Weeks passed, then months. Her presence became part of the structure, rather than an addition to it. She did not arrive late as often. When she did, it was with notice. When she stayed away, it was with explanation. Nothing was assumed. Nothing was hidden. At work, the distance held as promised. Her role shifted. His remained. The lines were clear enough that no one questioned them. Stability had a way of quieting curiosity. At home, the child thrived in the predictability. Homework became easier. Laughter returned more readily. They began leaving notes on the refrigerator again, small drawings, reminders written in careful handwriting. One evening, while he folded laundry, the child sat beside her on the couch. Are you staying? They asked, not looking up from their book. She glanced at him before answering. If that's what we're building. The child nodded, satisfied. Okay. He placed the folded clothes away and stood there for a moment, watching the scene settle into itself. No grand gestures, no promises spoken aloud, just presence. Later, after bedtime, they stood by the window, looking out at the quiet street below. Lights flickered on in neighboring apartments, lives continuing, ordinary and complete in their own ways. This feels like a place that stays, she said softly. It does, he agreed. She turned to him. There was no question in her expression now, only certainty shaped by patience. I didn't know how much I wanted this until I had to protect it, she said. He considered that. Some things only make sense once they're lived. She reached for his hand. Not suddenly, not dramatically. He took it without hesitation. The gesture felt less like beginning, and more like acknowledgement. Outside, a car passed. Somewhere down the block, someone laughed. Inside, the apartment held steady. Home did not need to be declared. It was already there.